everyone, and welcome to the Rising Stars podcast. I am your host, Brianna Moriarty, and I am super excited to announce today's guest. He is Jim Roddy, the VP of Marketing at RSPA, along with being an author, a podcast host, a business coach, and an overall channel champion. So we're going to learn a lot from him. I have lots of questions, so we're just going to dive right into it. So welcome, Jim. Thank you so much for being on the podcast.
Brianna, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure to talk with you and anybody from the STAR team.
Absolutely. So as I kind of mentioned in your intro, you have a super extensive background, not only within the channel, but outside of the channel, being, like I said, an author, a marketer, a business advisor, a basketball coach, as I found out on your LinkedIn, and probably more that I'm missing. So tell me about what drove you on all these different paths and what kind of keeps you motivated to continue achieving in all of these different areas.
That's an interesting question because, we kind of like behave what's normal to us, but very rarely does somebody say why. Like, can you look back and analyze that? And so,
Right.
I guess I would look back, and I went to a very tiny high school. So when I say tiny, I graduated third in my class, but I was not in the top 10%. So if you do the math, you're like, wait a second, there are fewer than 30 kids there. We graduated 15
Right.
kids,
Wow.
1-5 in my high school. And it was actually the biggest class in school history, Bethel Christian School. And I look back, what did I do in school? I played basketball, soccer. We actually had in the spring a co-ed softball team. I was in the high school play, not just on stage, but also in the light crew, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also selling tickets as well. The person there put myself and another senior in charge of selling the tickets. I was class president. I was on the yearbook. And then for our senior trip, we organized a mission trip to Jamaica as well. So like all that stuff was going on. And so that was kind of like, that's normal to me, right? To be able to do all these things, because in such a small school, if you didn't have a lot of kids doing a lot of different things, you wouldn't have had a soccer team, right? You wouldn't have had a basketball team or a play or things of that nature. So that's one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I think has driven me. And then also just the guidance of, and I actually have a quote that's in my office in 3 different spaces. It's by John Fetterman, who's a lieutenant governor here in Pennsylvania. I'm in Northwest PA. And he said, if you're good, help someone else get to good. So anything that I've learned from somebody else that they've helped me along the way, I'm more than happy to pass that along. And I get a lot of help from that in terms of guidance from the RSPA community, the general retail IT community as well. And so if there's anything that I have, I'm able to pass that along as well. And kind of as a business coach, like something that guides me is, and I actually have this note up on my wall, my job is to mobilize the expertise of others and share their collective wisdom. So I'm in a fortunate position where I'm talking with resellers, ISVs, vendors, and distributors. I say the leaders, the laggards, the people who are successful, the people who are struggling, and I'm able to kind of bring all that collective wisdom together, and I'm more than happy to share it. So the generosity of the community has really, helped drive me, as I have this role as a business coach and everything that's that's beyond that. I try to keep busy, stay out of trouble.
For sure. So, I mean, being kind of an overachiever has always been in your nature, and you've just kind of continued that on into, your professional career. How do you balance it all? I mean, you wrote a book last year. You're the VP of marketing for RSPA. You're doing probably a million other things. How do you kind of keep that balance?
Good question. One thing is I'm probably not as up on pop culture as other people are, right? Like I have a
Fair enough.
daughter, I have a 15-year-old daughter. And so sometimes she'll mention like these people who are famous to other folks. And I'm like, I don't know who that is, or like, is that an actor or is musician, singer, things of that nature. So just really trying to stay focused on those things and keeping organized. That's to me a real thing is you can't just kind of hope to get to something. Like you talked about writing the book. I had to have a very discipline in terms of when am I going to write the book? Because if I didn't do it on Monday, I didn't have to do it on that day. I didn't have to do it on Tuesday. Well, next thing you know, you're never writing a book, which is why I think a lot of people don't do that. So using what I call block scheduling, like blocking out time to do certain things, whether it's personal time, family time, exercising, listening to podcasts, things of that nature. Some you can do two at the same time. It's
Mhm.
really having that focus to make sure that you're able to follow through on those things. I learned very early on when I was coaching basketball, one of the assistant coaches, he would always preach, the will to win means nothing without the will to prepare. And so if
Yes.
you prepare for success, you're going to have a chance at winning. If you're just drifting through, maybe you'll get lucky and things will work out for you, but for the most part, you won't be able to. You'll just end up looking back and saying that you were more spinning around in the same place as opposed to advancing.
Absolutely. I love the concept of block scheduling. I use that, in my everyday life as well. So I want to, hear more about your journey as a channel business advisor. I'm kind of familiar with a lot of your other work, but not super familiar with, you kind of run your own company as a business advisor. So what made you decide to start offering these services, and how did you build that framework for your business?
Yeah, so just as I mentioned about the whole planning part, this wasn't something that I had planned that said, in this year at this time, I'm going to go be a business coach. It was more
Mhm.
serendipitous than that. So I've been in the retail IT channel for over 20 years now. The first 17 of those, starting in 1998 through like 2015, 2016 timeframe, I was with Business Solutions magazine, and so we were doing a lot of education. We were presenting at RetailNOW events and other industry events, and hiring was like a big specialty of mine. And that's a book that I've published called Hire Like You Just Beat Cancer. I'm a near 20-year cancer survivor, and so I published that back in 2012. So I'd give hiring presentations, and at the end I would have a handful of people standing in the back of the room, and they would say, I have a question for you. And it was almost like, I'm not going to be able to answer that in depth with us just standing up here. And so it
Mhm.
seems like there's more that we would need to do and have a conversation. So I would just naturally follow up with folks because they were RSPA members or they were Business Solutions Magazine subscribers. And then
Mhm.
those went well. And so people were grateful for that. So I thought to myself, like, well, could I do this full time as a coach? But the biggest gap was the revenue part of it, right? Like the
Right.
people who needed the most help had the fewest resources. So you're like, okay, well, I could be a good business coach, but I would just be eating bologna sandwiches and SpaghettiOs, for every single meal if I was lucky. So what kind of then started going down that path was talking to Tom Reichert, former chairperson of the RSPA. He was at that point with Vantiv. He had been with Mercury, and so
Mhm.
he had talked to me about that Vantiv at that time was looking for ways that they could have more engagements, more interactions with their VARs and their ISVs. And he said, that would be great if we could bring you on as a business coach. And so that's what they did in terms of saying this is just another service that was offered to those VAR and ISV. So that solved the whole money thing. They were just going to pay me a salary. It's going to be additional service to be stickier with
Right.
Vantiv and WorldPay. And then, like, I have always said this, that my whole business coaching is not based on me thinking Jimmy's a genius, right? Like, I have all this wisdom and all this experience that I'm going to impart on you. Sit down and listen to me, go on and on. Like I
Mhm.
said, I'm in the middle of of these resellers and these ISVs and learning their best practices. So when I started that, I immediately reached out to a bunch of resellers and software developers and said, what do you need? And one of them early on was Jason Cowan from Spark Solutions Group in Salt Lake City, Utah, and also in Southern California. And like one thing he said was, man, if you could put together a key performance indicator study, that would be very helpful. And then talk to a bunch of other folks. What would help? What would help? And so just based on their feedback, we said, what do you need? And then we've created services and resources and documentation and podcasts and blogs, all based on the community feedback. So it's almost like you start with the general framework and you have some
Mhm.
resources, but you build those out based on the community IQ. And to me, that way you can't go wrong. Because I always say
Right.
the best ideas aren't developed by anybody in this industry staring at the ceiling tiles like, oh, I have this genius idea. It is that constant engagement with the community, finding out again what's frustrating the laggards, what have they done wrong, and we've all done things wrong as business leaders, and what's working for the successful folks, and then being able to pass that information along as well. So I apologize for the long answer, but it's different from just some general business coaching methodology like the
Mhm.
EOS method or Sandler sales training or something like that. It is way more community based and really changes, quite frankly, from year to year based on the trends and as the best practices change and adapt.
Yeah, first, no need for apology because now I have quite a few follow-up questions. That's really an amazing story. So I want to start with you mentioned that your expertise was in hiring. So what kind of made you an expert in that area? Was that something that you studied in school or, just kind of started to pick up on throughout your years in the channel?
What made me an expert in it first was hiring poorly and feeling the
Hmm.
pain of doing that and saying, I do not want to do that
Yeah.
again. When I was self-employed, one of the first people who I hired was a salesperson. He didn't sell anything, and then his, first few weeks that I was paying him straight salary were going to come to an end. He said, "Can I have an advance on my next salary?" I stroked him a check and never heard from him again.
Ooh.
Right, and so it was the pain of that. Like, I've got to do more due diligence. So that
Sure.
was one angle from a hiring standpoint. The other one is because my background is in journalism, right,
Mhm.
from a school newspaper standpoint. And I had a sports magazine that I produced for 5.5 years. So it was always asking questions, digging deeper. That's kind of at the heart of what you're doing from an interview standpoint. One of the best people I ever worked with from an interviewing standpoint was a former police officer, right? Because they're doing all sorts of investigating. He just
Absolutely.
asked a
Yeah.
whole bunch of neutral questions. And then what helped was the organization that I worked for, again, Business Solutions Magazine, parent company was Jameson Publishing. And we were very thorough in terms of we wanted to have a really strong culture. And we knew
Mhm.
that was all up front in the time and the kind of people who you hire. And so the fact that we were a growing organization, so I got to do a lot of that. My coworkers got to do a lot of that. We got to huddle together and say, what are the best practices? That's really where the book and my expertise came from. It wasn't just my own personal experience, it was part of that, but it was also the lessons that we learned as an organization. And it wasn't just that we did a lot of hiring. We had very low turnover. We had standout employees who were million-dollar, multi-million-dollar producers, and they had great longevity as well. So it was always like anytime somebody would interact with our team, they're like, you guys are unbelievable. Like, what a collection of professionals you have, like these high
Mhm.
initiative, very accomplished folks. Again, it was based in Erie, Pennsylvania, which isn't known as the bastion, right, for the IT world, but
Right.
it was because of that very thorough hiring system that we had, that we built a standout culture that ended up being award winning, and really sparked growing a company. So that's kind of the root of where that all came from.
Okay, awesome. So you also mentioned, when you were reaching out to, I guess, the channel, VARs, ISVs, and asking what they needed, you mentioned a KPI study. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? What kind of went into that study? And was this more for, people that were hiring and then once they were onboarded, just didn't really know how to set those KPIs?
No, that's a good question. So if anybody wants to go find the current 2021 POS channel KPI study, just go to the RSPA website, go rspa.org. In the search button, just do KPI 2021. It'll be one of the first results that comes up there. So what happened was, like, going back to my conversation with Jason, he said, and this is, I think, what happens with a lot of SMBs, not just in our industry, not just in the retail IT channel, where they are running their own business, but the only thing they have to compare with from a numerical standpoint for their sales, their profits, their margins are what they did last year or last quarter, right? And so they don't even know if what they did last year was above average, was good, was terrible. Like,
Mhm.
they don't know. And that's kind of what Jason said is he has a couple friends in the industry that he could compare some numbers with, but it was way more anecdotal. And so he reached out and talked to as many, VARs and ISVs as we could and said, what would you want us to track? And so there was sales growth, there was profit margin, there was what percent of your revenue is recurring, how
Mhm.
much goes into marketing, how much goes into R&D, what's employee turnover, right? All those different metrics that you need to track in order to run a healthy business. Folks didn't know what the best practice was or what the standard was. And so that's where that whole survey came from. And I just remember being super stoked after I did the first one of those. I
Mhm.
went to a trade show. It was the NCC show. It was down in Florida, and Scott Duty, reseller, came up to me and said, "Hey, I'm looking to invest, from a marketing standpoint, but I'm not sure how much to put in. Do you have any statistics on that?" I'm like, "Do
Yes,
I?
I
Like,
do.
we just did that
Yeah.
report. Like, if you'd have asked me 2 weeks ago, nobody had that data anywhere." So
Mhm.
that's really where the KPI study came from. Is larger businesses get to compare against, the S&P 500, right, or Fortune 500, or things of that nature. VARs and ISVs really had nothing except anecdotal. And so that study, we've now done 5 of them. So now they can look back and see the trends 2016 through 2020 actuals, and then get to see 2021 projections as well.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to be checking that out. So you also mentioned that, a lot of the VARs and ISVs that kind of needed the business advising, when you first started getting into it, they probably had lower resources. But that's not to say that larger companies don't need business advising as well. So, what kind of common trends did you find amongst the VARs and ISVs that were benefiting from your workshops?
Good question. I'd say the trend, it's kind of like who benefits the most from these. They were 2 traits: high initiative and growth oriented, right? So if they were high initiative and like, I really want to make this business better, and they had an engine internally that made them want to move forward, that was a great interface because I was able to introduce them to resources, reading materials, people to talk to, and they would actually read the content, listen to the podcast, right? They would reach out to those people the next time we checked in. And then growth oriented as well. And that kind of ties in a lot of times with high initiative, where
Mhm.
folks say, I want to be able to grow my sales and grow my profits. And I've alluded a couple times where, I have these notes hanging up on my bulletin board. I had a lot of people ask me when I started down the path of business coach, because they were like, I don't really understand what you do, because I've never had somebody do that just from a general in our industry standpoint. And I had before, I work with VARs and ISVs, da 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 da. But I actually hand wrote on there high initiative, growth oriented, because I would have some folks, to be honest with you, we would talk every 60 or 90 days. And
Mhm.
then I would check in and I'm like, okay, you said you're going to do these things. Tell me about that. Like, oh, I got busy. I had this other thing to do. I never got around to it. I'm sorry. Then you check in another 60, 90 days. Same thing. They barely move the needle. And that's where I said, like, if I can't be there every day to like a personal trainer, right? To be a
Mhm.
business leader, you can't have somebody, I mean, quite frankly, babysitting you like that. Now there are
Right.
folks who I work with where, what did you do in the past 60 days? And they're like, I did everything that we talked about. Plus I also learned this and I went down this path. Those are the folks who are successful. They're
Mhm.
trying, they're testing, they're measuring, they're adapting, and they're trying again, right? They're not, again, geniuses on their own and they have all the right answers, but they get so many cycles at trying to get better that they are the ones who are learning. But if you're just simply focusing on the day-to-day business, or you're just saying, I'm fine, like I don't want to have to come in early, stay
Right.
late, work weekends, oh, more people, like that's more problems. If you have that approach, it's probably not going to work out with any business coach, and that ends up being a lifestyle business. So yeah, so high initiative, growth oriented, those are the folks who tend to work with the best, and those are the folks who tend to be the most successful VARs and ISVs.
Yeah, and I would say that that kind of mindset applies to everything, whether it's business or personal life. I'm not sure who to attribute this quote to, or if I'm saying it correctly, but I always think, change doesn't happen unless change happens. So if you want to improve in any sort of way, you got to change what you're doing. You have to make adjustments. So, um,
Yeah. There's managed services provider, business coach. His name is Carl Polachuk. I worked with him a lot back in my business solutions days. And he would say in every single one of his presentations, nothing happens by itself.
yes.
You have to go out and make it happen. So yeah, nothing happens by itself. Yeah, I don't know who the quote that you brought up. I'm not sure who said that, but I'm always happy to praise Carl for nothing happens by itself.
For sure. All right. Well, we're just going to take a really quick break to talk about Retail Now 2021. So, if you're like me, you've been definitely itching to get back to trade shows. The buzz of the show floor, the fun filled nights, there's really nothing better. So, I'm super excited to announce that I and the entire STAR team will be at Retail Now 2021 in Nashville from July 25th to the 28th. And I invite you all to come join me. This year's show is sure to be one to remember with expanded education tracks, new cutting edge exhibitors, in-depth conversations about this year's unique challenges, and much more. And being the Retail IT Channel's #1 trade show, you know that they're going to have an awesome keynote, John Taffer from Bar Rescue, who I am personally so excited about. So register today for Retail Now at gorspa.org and be sure to swing by booth 706 to visit me and the entire STAR team. All right, Jim. So speaking of RSPA and Retail Now, you joined the RSPA team as a staff member. What was that, in 2019?
That's right.
Okay. So tell me about your experience there because, as a RSPA staff member, RSPA brings so much benefit to their members. You're kind of getting to be a business advisor and that VP of marketing all in one. So what have you guys done recently to bring more value to to members in a digital format?
Sure, that's a good question. And going back to when I first joined, and I mentioned like reaching out to members and asking them, what could we do? I also asked, what's your perspective of the RSPA? And one thing that we learned from talking internally as a team and also talking to our members is a lot of people knew RSPA mostly as Retail Now and Bob Goldberg, who was for many, many years the legal counsel, right? Like that's what they saw the RSPA as. And so I actually had one of the members say to me, I want the RSPA more in my face. I want them to be a part of my daily, my weekly life in terms of business best practices, resources, learnings, and things of that nature. And so to me, that was almost like, a freeing kind of thing, because from being in marketing, Brianna, like I don't want to reach out too many times, right? I don't want to send too many emails, but I've kind of learned through my, I guess it's 30 years now of being in the professional world. If you have something valuable, people will take that every hour from you, right? But if you don't have something valuable, you should probably just keep it to yourself. So there is a combination of, I want you to be more in my face, but you better provide me with valuable content. So what we've done is we've launched, again, this is now going back 2+ years. We launched a blog where it's the RSPA staff providing guidance either from our own experiences or from conversations with our members. We also beefed up a section that we call Community IQ, which is where all of our members are contributing thought leadership content. And so we put that on our website, push it out through social media for our weekly newsletter as well. We also launched a podcast called the Trusted Advisor Podcast. We've actually done over 50 episodes of that now. And so that's had a lot of really good traction, and really it's us talking with members, right? And so it's not just that we bring in a whole bunch of outside people, it's featuring members and these folks who are leaders in the industry. We also, because of COVID, like everything had to go digital. When everybody was feeling the crisis and they didn't know, up from down, quite frankly, at that point, which was, like April of 2020, we started doing these informal roundtables. We just reached out to all members and said, here's a GoToMeeting link, show up at this time and we'll talk about, answer your questions, and we'll have other people on the call who can help provide their perspective. So we did that during COVID. And then after COVID, we've continued that by having roundtables that focus on particular topics, whether it's like sales marketing or software developer challenges, things of that nature. And then also we just announced the RSPA Academy that's been going on for a while with Strong Education, but we beefed that up with a program called Accelerate, where it's a combination of training on demand that you can get general business to business or staff training best practices. And then we're also introducing industry specific content to that as well. So as much as we of course want people to attend Retail Now, we wanted to attend our winter conference Inspire as well. We also understand year round we need to be a presence in their business day to day as well. And so that's why we rolled out again the blog, Community IQ, the podcast, the roundtables, and then RSPA Academy Accelerate.
Absolutely. And I have to say, I think those resources have been so valuable for the members. I know it definitely has been for the STAR team over the last couple of years. I've definitely seen RSPA evolve from being just, the 2 trade shows a year to being, year-round benefits. So, I have to attribute a lot of that to you. Um, so
Well, I
speaking,
appreciate that. I will
oh,
say
go ahead.
it's a team effort, but then
Mhm.
also what was interesting was, like I told you, back in 2019, it was a lot of people saw us as Retail Now and Bob Goldberg. And
Right.
then in 2020, Bob Goldberg announced he was retiring. And then because of the pandemic, we had no Retail Now. And it's like, oh, like the two biggest things we have that we're known for, we
Yeah.
better be able to pivot to something else. And so thank goodness the team, made a lot of progress on those other digital avenues in 2019. So we're able to just expand upon them in
Mhm.
2020. But yeah, we all learned, necessity is the mother of invention, and that certainly was the case. I do have to say, so Bob is retired, but Jill Miller, who I think you've crossed paths with before,
Mhm.
Brianna, is our new general counsel, and I guess not so new anymore because we brought her on board in 2020 to work alongside with Bob. But she has a ton of experience, not just from a legal standpoint, but from a business standpoint, and she provides stellar business advice. So that's another year-round resource that we offer as well to resellers and software developers.
Yeah, and that's something I think a lot of members don't even realize. They probably are like, "Okay, I'm gonna be an RSPA member so I can get a discounted Retail Now pass," and they don't look at all of the other benefits that are offered. But I always say it's, if especially if you're just getting started in the channel, joining RSPA should be your first move always. Um, so speaking of Retail Now, I know that we're all dying to get back in person after so long of being home. As I mentioned, during our commercial break, there's going to be a lot of education sessions. John Taffer as the keynote speaker. So tell me, what else? What's going to be the real value of Retail Now this year after taking 2020 off?
Right. Well, first, like relearning human interaction, right? It's
Right.
because, like, a few weeks ago, I actually bumped into somebody that reached out and shook my hand, and I was like, I haven't shaken anybody's hand
Yeah.
since I think it was March of 2020. Like, so that's like almost like a fundamental human interaction thing. But I guess
Yeah.
you can go do that anywhere. But what I think is unique from a Retail Now standpoint, the way that I've described it, I guess, just for folks who don't know my history. So I've been full time with the RSPA for 2 years, but I was a volunteer for, what was it, 12 or 13 years
Mhm.
before that. So I've been coming to the Retail Now events and involved in the association for many, many years. I always say, before the RSP paid me to tell people to join the association, I was telling people to join the association
Mhm.
and attend Retail Now. And the way that I've always described that show is, it's like making 1,000 phone calls in 3 days, right? Like, you get so much market intelligence by going to the education events, by bumping into people in the hallway, by talking to as many people as you can in the expo hall or at the events, things like that. You get so much market intelligence that it just can't be replaced anywhere else. It's also vendor neutral as well. Like, there's a lot of great vendor and distributor conferences as well, but they don't get everybody in the same room like Retail Now does. So to be able to get so many different perspectives, it just across 3 days, like our event this year is actually going to be uh, done in just less than 48 hours, right? It starts Sunday night and then it goes to Tuesday afternoon, because we know how busy people are. We're going to be able to pack it all in
Mhm.
essentially in 48 hours. So I just think there's going to be huge value in terms of that we've all been out of the loop of getting this serendipitous information where you bump into something and you say, I don't know that. I didn't know that. I didn't hear about that. We've all missed out on that. And Retail
Yeah.
Now is going to offer that in spades. There's going to be a lot of catch up, over the past 2 years that a lot of folks didn't know from a business standpoint, from a principle standpoint, from a trend standpoint, that I think we're all going to learn. So I'm definitely looking forward to the days after Retail Now to be a
Mhm.
lot smarter than I have coming in there.
Absolutely. I think I've heard you refer to it as, the channel's kind of coming out party after being stuck at home for so long. So I think, the education is going to be almost like a smack in the face because, we've had so many digital resources, podcasts, blogs, but it's just not the same as being in person and being hands-on. So I know a lot of people are looking forward to it.
Yeah, you
So
and me both. It'll be nice to see you again in person.
absolutely.
My joke is Retail Now featuring human beings in 3D, right? Because we just haven't seen that in so long.
Right. So I do want to shift gears just a little bit. It was less than a year ago that you've released your book, The Walk-On Method. So can you kind of give our listeners a little bit of an overview about that book and what inspired you to write it?
Sure. So it's the full title is The Walk-On Method to Career and Business Success. And so, what a walk-on is, for those who don't know, it's somebody who plays on a college sports team where like everybody else has a scholarship, but the walk-on is a non-scholarship person. And so, what I did was I interviewed 30 underdog athletes and talked about their college experience, scrambling to make a team, scrambling to stay on the team, getting no playing time, sometimes having no uniform. If they get a uniform, it doesn't fit, right? Getting
Mhm.
no respect, no attention, really being forced in a position where you're serving others and you're focusing on the team goals. And so, how did that experience as a walk on impact them as a professional, years or even decades down the road? And so, I have to share, I'm personally a walk on myself. I played at a Division II school here in Erie, Gannon University. It was a small college basketball powerhouse. And I went through all those things that I mentioned earlier: no uniform, too large a uniform, coach didn't
Right.
know my name, things of that nature. And so I tracked down a whole bunch of folks and found out that they were wildly successful. And that was really the platform, their walk on experience. And so the book goes, beyond just interesting stories, and it really outlines how anybody can learn the walk on attitude and follow the walk on method, change their behavior, and succeed in their career. So, like, the gist of the book is ordinary people will accomplish extraordinary feats when their energy is properly channeled. And the way that
Mhm.
these walk ons behave now is second nature because they were forced to behave that way to survive as a walk on. So, the book is like really accessible stories, principles, and actions that you can take to really advance your own career or advance your business as well. I've had a lot of parents say to me, like, I need my kid to read this, right? Because these are the fundamental things that a lot of times get overlooked.
For sure. So our channel, I would say, you can take general business aspects and relate it to our channel and our industry, but it's a little unique the way that our industry operates. So tell me about how these stories of walk-ons can directly relate to, our RSPA members, VARs, ISVs, people within our specific channel.
Sure. So one thing that I did was, again, if anybody can pick up on a theme here, I don't say, I have a great idea, I'm going to move forward with it. I think, well, this might be good, I'm going to bounce it off a lot of people. So
Mhm.
and the RSP community I've been a, part of in the retail IT channel for many years. And so when I first had this idea for the book, I started doing a few interviews and then started writing some sample chapters. I intentionally bounced them off some individuals who I knew had no sports history, no sports connection whatsoever. In fact, they might have even been averse to sports at all, to say, does this resonate with you? Like, do you want to read this? And so I always tell people, this is the walk on method. The whole book is a career book with a sports background. It's not like a sports book where we're talking about just points per game and he made this, crossover dribble, reverse
Mhm.
layup, right? Things of that nature. You don't have to be a sports fan in order to like it and in order to really glean something from it. And again, I know that because I bounce it off a whole bunch of people
Right.
who had no sports background whatsoever. It's really the fundamentals of what people makes people successful in whatever line of work or path or career they go down.
Okay, awesome. So I could probably ask you a million more questions, but we're going to end with just, kind of a way to wrap this all up. If you could offer one piece of business advice to our VARs in the channel, either from your book, your business advising courses, or otherwise, what would that be?
Uh, Good question. If you give me a little latitude, I'll offer one and it kind of bleed into a second one. But I'd
Absolutely,
say the
yes.
quote is, and had this hanging up, and my daughter has seen this since I think we got this when she was 1 or 2 years old, and she knows this. It's an Abraham Lincoln quote, and it's, "Whatever you are, be a good one." And so, whatever path you decide to go down,
Hmm.
make sure that you're a good one from a personal standpoint. Um, you know, if you're a son, a daughter, brother, sister, boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, wife, parent, whatever you are, be a good one of those. Fulfill that duty in life, in your organization, right? Whether you're a brand new person, whether you're an intern, a first-year staffer, a department head, a manager, a CEO, right? A chairman, chairwoman, chairperson, whatever you are, be a good one. And to me, where a good one comes from is it's not just the skill level, but it's in from a character standpoint. And so I always tell people, tying in back with the hiring thing, care about character. Right.
Mhm.
And so I'm happy for the listeners of this. I have a list of 18 character traits that I list in my book, Hire Like You Just Beat Cancer. I'll also send, if people reach out and mention this podcast, I'll send them that list. I'll also send them a free chapter from the Walk-On Method, Career and Business Success. But the list of character traits that we have in Hire Like You Just Beat Cancer, there's 18 of them. Oftentimes when people think of character, they just think about, oh, it's honesty, right? Like I'm honest, I tell the truth, and that's all that character is about. But character is about, having the hard conversation. It's about treating people with kindness. It's about having responsibility and taking responsibility for what you do. It's having that work ethic. It's all those different things that go into it. So, like I said, to me, the headliner is whatever you are, be a good one. But these character traits are the things that tell you what is truly good. Are you acting in earnest? Are you acting with high character? And to me, that has really been a guide for me. It was a guide for us at Jameson Publishing. It's how we hired people, right? We looked a little bit at a skill, but we thought we could always teach that. But we really, really drilled into the character. And that's why we had a special organization. And the folks that I've been able to study over the years here in the channel, the ones who care about character and really have deep, firm roots and aren't just looking to make the next sale or catch on the next trend or something like that, the people with those deep roots, those are the ones who are successful personally and professionally.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it also goes back to, you said whatever you are, be a good one, but we can also kind of apply it to whatever you do it well. So like, you have VARs or ISVs, they're kind of trying to do everything, but focus on that one thing that really makes you stand out and, become an expert in it, do it really, really well. And then you don't really have to compete,
Absolutely.
right? Yeah. So
that's right. Have your own niche, like be special in what you do and just don't race the price, right? It's got to be some special service, bundle, expertise, something that you offer. Yeah. So whether you're a VAR, right? Whether you call yourself a reseller, an ISV, an ISO, whatever you are, be a good one, be a special one.
Absolutely. Well, Jim, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. Can you share with our listeners where they can further connect with you and where they could find your books?
Sure, happy to do it. So I'll give out my RSPA email address. It's jroddy, so the letter J, and then RODDY at gorspa.org. So jroddy@gorspa.org. Again, if you reach out to me and mention this podcast, I'd be happy to send you a free chapter from the Walk-On Method, and then also the list of the 18 character traits that are featured in Hire Like You Just Beat Cancer. And both of those books are available on Amazon. So just search for the Walk-On Method to Career and Business Success or Hire Like You Just Beat Cancer on Amazon, and you can purchase it there as well. If you want to buy books for your team, just again, reach out to me directly and be glad to make that happen.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. As a reminder, STAR will be at RetailNOW booth 706. I'll also be giving an education session along with Blue Star's James Cordy on finding your brand voice and articulating some unique selling points. So if that's something you're interested, feel free to stop by. GoRSPA.org is where you can find all the details and the agenda of RetailNOW 2021. For Star Micronics, you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube. If you like today's episode, please follow, subscribe, give us a review. We are always happy to hear feedback, good or bad, so that we can, tailor our episodes to you in the future. So thank you so much, Jim.